Hi guys, following on from my first Pop Up Parade figure review of Asuna, the video link of which is in the description below, I'm continuing with the Sword Art Online or SAO series of mid-tier figures by Good Smile Company, with the main or co-protagonist, namely Kirito, being the focal point this time around. As someone who has enjoyed SAO enough to want to collect figures based on the series, the Pop Up Parade version feels like the perfect price point for a pre-painted figure of Kirito to accompany his fellow protagonist Asuna, at the same scale on the display shelf. Now, unlike Asuna before him, Kirito was purchased brand new from a local hobby store that was a Good Smile Company partner shop. I found Kirito to be less overpriced at 1.5 times its retail price at release versus the 3 times I noticed for Asuna. Coupled with Pop Up Parade Kirito's rarity in the aftermarket, I went ahead to get him at slightly above retail. But like Asuna, this mid-tier figure of Kirito is clearly visible through almost completely clear plastic packaging, which is one of the characteristics of this product line. While I'm a fan of the visual access collectors have to the figure even before it has been unboxed, I personally find the boxes a pain to collapse and store, though to be fair, this is an issue faced by collectors regardless of the type of packaging involved. Because this is technically not a pre-owned figure, I suppose the aftermarket equivalent would be to define it as MISB, or Mean in Seal box. Its condition dictates that I'll have to cut the tape seals first, which I'm doing now, before removing the figure and its inner protective materials from the clear box packaging, like so. Kirito's inner protective materials comprise clear plastic sheets wrapped around the figure, which itself is sandwiched between 2 sturdy plastic blisters. Now I find this to be an effective way to protect the figure from damage, yet still allowing almost total visual access to the Pop-Up Parade figure, as Kirito has more than his fair share of plastic sheet wrapping that distort visuals somewhat. From what I can see so far, Kirito comes fully formed with the exception of the blade of one of 2 swords that he wields in the anime. And then there's the infamous bare bone base that the Pop Up Parade series is known for, which in this case is just a simple black hexagonal plastic base. This last part I'm extricating from the plastic blister is the blade that I mentioned earlier. Before we go ahead to take a close-up look at Kirito, let's just remove the plastic wrappings first. It's obvious Kirito's almost all black ensemble isn't going to win over any neutral fans with its limited color scheme. Most collectors of this figure will most likely, like me, be someone who is a fan of Sword Art Online or SAO. As such, what concerns me most is how closely this figure resembles the character in the anime. In terms of likeness, Good Smile Company does not disappoint. But more than that is just how well they have recreated the design of Kirito's black swordsman outfit, and accessories such as his main sword elucidator, which he's reaching for with his right hand. Meanwhile, his primarily black attire does an excellent job of not descending into a visual snowfest, helped greatly by the grey-coloured trimmings as well as silver parts, which combine to provide numerous details for the eyes to feast on despite the overwhelmingly neutral and dull colour scheme. What truly makes all this work is the exceptionally clean lines of the figure's paintwork. That is made all the more critical because any shoddy paintwork would have become painfully obvious to the eye, due to the high contrast between the blacks and the silvers as well as the greys. Now Kirito comes as an almost fully assembled figure with the exception of the turquoise blade of his secondary sword called the Dark Repulser, which I'm holding in my hands now. The blade has nicely sculpted details and is painted in what looks like 3 shades of turquoise, from dark near the hilt to extremely light on the blade's edge. A peg at the bottom end of the blade is the connection point that will attach it to the sword handle on Kirito's left hand. Lastly is the black hexagonal base that Kirito will be standing on. And like all bases found in the Pop Up Parade line of figures, it is a simple no-frills piece of plastic molded in a single color. Because assembly is just a straightforward process of matching the peg on Dark Repulser's blade to the hole on the sword's hilt, as well as the pegs on Kirito's feet to the holes on the base, I'm sure you'll agree with me there's no need for any commentary during the assembly process. That being said, I won't be cutting out the assembly process for this video, and I'll let it continue on with just the background music running for those of you who still wish to observe the process. But for those of you who want to skip the assembly portion of this video, feel free to use the timestamps to skip ahead. Well, I'm back and Kirito is finally fully assembled. Next up is a full 360-degree view of the Pop-Up Parade figure of Kirito. With Kirito standing upright, we'll then be able to get a better view of him and see the figure as it will look like on display. With a height of 17.5 centimeters from the bottom of his feet to the top of his head, or slightly higher at 19 centimeters if measured to the tallest point of the figure, which is the end of Elucidator's hilt, Kirito certainly stands taller than Asuna from the same line of pre-painted figures. This is in line with both characters' physical attributes, namely their height as portrayed in the anime. With regard to shelf presence, Kirito qualifies, but with a slight caveat. His appearance is striking in both details and pose, while being instantly recognizable by any SAO fan because of that, as well as due to the likeness factor. But for the average collector, Kirito's almost all black color scheme may not hold a similar appeal as they do for a fan. On that note, Good Smile Company did an excellent job injecting natural-looking dynamic movement into what is essentially only a standing pose. Having Kirito utilize his dual-wheel skill while his coat flutters out behind his back, combined with the positioning of his arms and legs, does just enough to break up the straight lines of his stiff upper back posture. As I alluded to earlier, all the details here attest to Good Smile Company knowing their subject matter and caring enough to translate it into a pre-painted figure form that's instantly recognizable by fans. For example, both the grey trimmings and silver accessories not only help alleviate the dull all-black color scheme of his clothing, but also ensure Kirito's black swordsman's outfit is an accurate recreation of the animated version, as is the wonderfully detailed sword he is wielding. Due to Pop Up Parade's excellent track record, I wasn't too concerned with how well Kirito the figure resembled Kirito the animated character, but I was still glad that my confidence was not misplaced, as exceptions can never be ruled out. Putting aside the dull color scheme that extends to Kirito's head and face, after all, he does have black hair and eyes that blend in with his predominantly black outfit, the likeness is definitely obvious. From the hairstyle to the shape of both his eyes and jawline, the sculpted details are spot on. Meanwhile, at this zoomed-in view of the figure's upper half, the clean paint lines, while still evident on the grey trimmings of his outfit, were not entirely perfect, which in my experience is still the bane of budget as well as mid-tier figures, though it's less of an issue for mid-tier figures due to presumably better quality control. But I digress. The miniature painter in me may be nitpicking on an imperfect paint job, but in truth, it's easy to attempt a near-perfect paint job when it's just one painter working on one figure. Even mid-tier figures are mass-produced, so a little paint outside the lines are unfortunately to be expected. And to Good Smile Company's credit, the details on Kirito, simple as they may be, are well executed. I particularly love the sword he is wielding, i.e. Dark Repulser, and the one he is drawing from the scabbard, i.e. Elucidator. I also love how they got the details correct on both scabbards, as they are different for either swords. From this slightly top-down view, we can get a better look at both scabbards, as well as the swords. But more than that, it also gives us a good view of the back of his coat, whose ends are billowing out behind him. It's a design that lends some dynamic movement to his pose as to the way he's holding both swords, which incidentally, from this top-down view, we can also get a clear look at the fully drawn sword, i.e. Dark Repulser. A color scheme of 3 tints of turquoise on the Dark Repulser's details provide Kirito's secondary sword a sense of depth to it. In this close-up view of Kirito's lower half, we are afforded another view of his billowing coat and a chance to check details such as his belt buckle and boots, both of which have silver or metal-colored parts, with the boots having additional grey lining. His trousers are just plain black, yet they are very nicely sculpted, details of which still show through despite the dull color scheme. In a way, the equally black base does help keep the color scheme consistent, and in this case, the simplicity of the base doesn't look out of place with the rest of the figure. The dark colored base also helps to contrast with Asuna's all-white base when both of them are paired together for display. Breaking this pop-up parade figure of Kirito isn't as straightforward as it might seem. To non-fans, this sword art online figure is unlikely to be something that will jump out at them in an aesthetically pleasing way due to the dull color scheme. And yet, to fans, this is an excellent mid-tier figure of Kirito by way of all the accurately recreated details on the figure, as I had highlighted earlier. Even the normally bare-bones nature of the pop-up parade display bases now work in its favor, as the all-black base goes well stylistically with Kirito's predominantly black swordsman outfit. Of course, the likeness factor of the figure's facial features as well as hairstyle is another key characteristic of pop-up parade figures that continues on with this figure. It is also to the figure's credit that it still manages to convey a sense of dynamic movement with the way Kirito is wielding one sword and drawing another from its scabbard, the stance he's adopting as he does this, as well as the billowing coat. In spite of the neutral color scheme, the clean grey trimmings on his coat and silvers of the metal accessories make the details stand out even from the back view. So in terms of its rating, this pop-up parade scale painted figure of Kirito gets a rating of B rank or platinum. Its dull color scheme somewhat obscures the amazing details that this figure has, details that perhaps admittedly can only be truly appreciated by an SAO fan. On its own, the figure doesn't really stand out except perhaps to fans of the SAO or Sword Art Online series. On that note, Kirito definitely pairs extremely well with Asuna from the same Pop-Up Parade line of figures since they are both in a similar scale or size. I'll provide a link to Asuna's video down in the description below if you haven't seen it yet. Well, that's my first pair of Pop-Up Parade figures unboxed and reviewed. There definitely will be more videos on figures from this Good Smile Company mid-tier line, so please do look out for them. Anyway, That's all we have time for today. Until we meet again for content on pre-painted figures or custom scale model kit projects, thanks so much for watching. Be well and be happy.